Hello, and welcome back to the Reactivist Podcast. I'm Marlena Shiro. Joining me today is my former colleague from television and my former partner in crime, the crime being comedy, and a bit of a single white female and get pregnant exactly the same time I got pregnant. So, Katie Finn, welcome to the Reactivist. It is so good to have you here.
Thank you. I also officiated your wedding.
Why do I always forget this?
I don't know. You should talk to someone about that.
I should talk to myself about that right after I figure out why I keep cutting my own bangs when I've never had any sort of training in cutting hair. First, let's get into the history of us for a second. We used to perform together. We had a show that had 3 installations, right? Because I was pregnant and you weren't, and it was 2 comics and a baby. And then it was 2 comics and a baby part 2, because I had the said baby. And then you got pregnant, and then it was 2 comics and too many babies. I think it's time that we do a rebirth, if you will, of our show. And I think maybe we should call it The Afterbirth.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. We should put that on our 2025 list.
Not to be confused with Project 2025. So... different kind of project, but I am done having babies, and apparently so are you. You recently did a monologue, and I want you to tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was an original piece I wrote. It was based on sort of the combination of 2 jokes that I tell about just the struggles of being a mom. So the first joke, I took my daughter to Shake Shack, I gave her some French fries and a milkshake out of mom guilt. My daughter is eating her fries and having her shake. She's happy, so now I'm feeling better and relieved. And I took a French fry off my daughter's plate, and I should preface that she was probably about 2 at the time, so little. And she flipped out on me.
She's like, "No, you can't have that. Spit it out." So I did. And then I started apologizing to her.
And that's the struggle of being a mom. And that's kind of the joke. It's like you want your kids to feel good, and you want to give them what they want. Like you want to give them that. But on the other hand, they can't run around roughshod demanding you do things, and then you just do it.
Exactly. And then what was the mom guilt that led to the French fry incident?
Yes. So the event that precipitated the French fry incident was at the time I lived in Manhattan, and if you've ever been in Manhattan, you know there's a Duane Reade every 50 feet, and that was the same case where I live. So I was just trying to get down the block to go to Duane Reade. My daughter in the stroller, it was cold out. She kept taking off her mittens and throwing them on the ground, so I'd stop and put them on, and this went on 3 or 4 times, to the point that it's now what should have been a 60-second walk. We're now several minutes in because I have to keep stopping and do this. So then I gave up. I said, Bridget, I'm not doing it anymore. It's you're just going to have cold hands.
Guess what? You're going to have cold hands now. Mommy doesn't care. I don't take 2 steps down the sidewalk, and this woman walks by me and goes, "That little girl needs mittens." I said, "Ma'am, you're absolutely right, but then she can't hold her parents' cigarette, and..."
At what point do you just give up as a mom? Do I stand outside in the cold putting mittens on a kid 10 times? We're not going to a Duane Reade in Antarctica, but it was just so funny that I had this moment of well, I'm going to try and teach her a little bit of a consequence for the action. And then 2 seconds later, some woman's like, "Ugh, you baby." And it's it was just so defeating. So it's I know. And then, but that's where the mom guilt set in. It's well, should I have been more patient? I should be more patient. Then you start going down a rabbit hole. I've never been patient. Why is that? You should have more patience. And then...
So to say all of that, then the inner monologue became the inspiration for this 3-minute monologue.
The monologue is as if I'm talking to a therapist, which I did at the time. I'm not ashamed to say that. We're going through this angst of, and really the emotional toll it can take being a new mother, and that shift to go from your life to motherhood. And part of it was the thought of, do I have a second kid? Because my daughter's at that point where she was 2. Do we go for number 2? And then it was like, I don't know. Am I even doing a good job with number 1? Like, should I even bring a second kid? Like, so that was kind of where the monologue went.
And it's funny because we talk about judgment, right? And people, judge how other people parent, and then you end up judging yourself. And mom guilt comes in all types of ways. I've talked about this before, where you put all your energy, and are you putting too much energy into one space versus the other, and which one's suffering? And the answer is they're all suffering, right? Like, so when you know that you need to be with your child, which is the highest priority, right? But then at the same time, like, you have all of this pressure when it comes to work and being productive, and then doing everything else that it takes to just be an adult, right? So I get it. You have done some other sketch comedy stuff that you were working through, and we were talking about the different types of moms out there. What did you say? The never volunteer mom?
Yeah. At my school, it's like you see the same small pocket of moms that you always see doing the volunteers. So it's like the never volunteer mom, where it's like, can you really, like, just never make, like, it's like they can't make the time to ever volunteer. And is it a little audacious to dictate how someone should manage their time? Maybe. There's all these events that go on at school, and everyone's time is different and limited. But, and myself included as a full-time working mom, but I do at least once, twice a year, like, I want to, like, contribute at the school. I think it's good for a child to see a parent's interest in school. But with enough planning, and it's the same events during the year, mostly for these schools, like the same thing every year, you should be able to carve out 1 hour once a school year to do the book fair or the field day, whatever it is.
I myself have been called a helicopter mom. I could be both the non-volunteer mom and the helicopter mom, because it's like I will show up to things, but it's basically so I can supervise my own child. I should be supervising maybe 6 kids or something like that. But I don't think I'm a helicopter mom. I just think I'm a mom. Like, I think that there's moms out there that these free range parent types who are just like, it'll all work out. And I'm just like, yeah, like when the car swerves off the road to avoid the child that you weren't watching yet, it'll all work out for your child. Maybe not the person who just crashed into a tree because of your kumbaya, like Age of Aquarius mothering or whatever.
I mean, I do want to be fair real quick and say, I am of the mindset too. It's like the dads have an onus as well. Someone in the household where there's no volunteer. It's almost like no volunteer family in a way. It's like, you got to send someone. Send a grandma.
Right.
Send someone.
That's the other pressure that is on women, though. It's like, as far as women have come in this world, it's always about, the working mom or the stay-at-home mom. And I don't want to go all off on the motherhood thing and being a woman thing, but we do still take on the brunt of doing everything. I was talking to you recently, and I sent you the article on it about how in the state of New Jersey, they have lowered the standards for teachers because there's a shortage of teachers. And so they've lowered the testing standards for teachers so that they can fast track getting teachers now in the school, which is counterintuitive to education. It's a very broken system, the public school system.
I agree.
Right? And that's the crazy part. It's so broken, right? But I moved out of the city 6 years ago, right? And because the schools in New York City are horrific after 5th grade, if you want to do public school and if you want to do private school and basically be a prostitute for the rest of your life so that you could actually pay for private school, you could do that. But you move out and then you go to the public school system that's supposed to be better. Here we are with teachers who don't need to pass basic reading and math certification tests. I don't understand.
Look, New Jersey's not the first state to lower their standards to get more teachers in the door. That's happened, in other states as well. Like, we're following suit. There are states on both sides of the, East and West, and that have been having to do this. So when I as a parent with a child in public school, I certainly don't like seeing that. I don't want my education standards lower. If anything, I want them to be higher because we globally lag behind. What we should be talking about is, why is there a teacher shortage? Why is that? And there are a few reasons in my opinion, partial fact. fact of the matter is, it was typically a female-dominated industry for a very long time. And why was that? Because that was really one of the fewer options for women. If you rewind the clock, even honestly, Marlena, like not so far outside of our lifetimes, like 40, 50, and then go back 60, 70 years ago, the jobs for women were pretty much like administrative assistant, typist, nurse, teacher. You could really count on less than two hands, like a job that really was available to a woman. So by default now, with more opportunities for women, you have less women entering that workforce. The other piece of it is there's a problem with the salaries that needs to be addressed.
I'm sorry. So you and I are both in the state of New Jersey, which has the highest property taxes. These funds go to the schools, but yet the schools are constantly having these fundraisers and they've increased.
You're right. Our property tax, all of this money that goes towards the schools. But the problem is we're paying all this property taxes, right? All this money. But the percentage of it that's not actually going to a school, to a teacher, it's going to services and the Board of Ed. And look, we need some of those services don't get me wrong, but there are some children that have requirements and special needs, and like the onus goes entirely on the school to solve those needs. And the other piece of it is, I think there's a problem with the parents. Like, it's really hard to be a teacher. My mother has been a public school teacher in Connecticut for the last 25 years. The story she tells of just like how difficult the parents can be in terms of questioning everything a teacher does. It makes it a really hard job. The parents, like, if you're, and it's tied to no accountability for the kid. The parents make it a difficult industry.
I just don't think that lowering the standard for the students alone is bad. And then lowering the standards for the teachers is even worse. I mean, what are these kids going to come out knowing? Especially when, like you said, with the Board of Education, I fought for a year over a library. We had a library in our school. We went away for summer break. We come back and there's no library, and there was no message about the library. And this huge space in the middle of the school, which is a K through 8, now it's a technology room, and it's all screens. And because now the new thing is gaming and coding and all of these things. So you can be on a team and play virtual sports in this room. And and then all the books went into, not all the books, a lot of the books went away. And you have like this small classroom that has shelves with books on it that they're calling the library. And it's like, wait a second, I'm sorry. You spent, $75,000 or whatever it was to put in these screens, and you're taking away a central part of learning, which is literacy, right? I'm not saying they're not teaching people how to read, but they're, in my opinion, glorifying online gaming and tech. I mean, I know technology is the wave of the future and kids are going to be coding and all of these things. But prior to that, I'm pretty sure reading should be top of list, especially when it's a K through 8 school and you have kindergartners and first graders and second graders who are learning how to read, right? So shouldn't the gaming room be in the classroom and the library be back in the actual library itself? Call me crazy. But, they had all this extra funding from the 2020 era that they had to use the emergency funds by a certain point or they were going to lose these funds. And what did they do? They wanted to put in new floors in the gym. And so that's what they did. That's what they took all this money. And I don't even know where the rest of the money went. Like, I really just don't know where the rest of the money went, why it didn't go toward other things that the school could use. But no, we had to get a new floor in the gym. Broken system from the top down. You could go to these meetings, they record it, it goes into the minutes, and then it goes into the ether because no one actually does anything about it. It just never got addressed. Yeah. I mean, it got addressed in that, we put a bunch of books in this other classroom. So there's your library. And it's just like, for the money that you had left over from your emergency funds that you had to use, you could have built another space that would have been a library. There's a subcommittee that comes up with an agenda and nobody knows who's on that subcommittee. And then that goes into the actual agenda that hits the table in the board and boom, everything's approved. Your public comment, it's almost like performative. It's like a pretend voice in the situation.
Oh yeah. It's bonkers. And the issue with, I think, a lot of these school boards is there's no oversight. A lot of unnecessary spending, like a ton of it. Like my daughter goes to the summer program through the public school system for a few weeks in July. I pay a little bit of money for it, subsidized with my tax dollars. And she comes home. I was just cleaning up after the holidays. Like, we found all this stuff from the summer with a whole bag full of like a math book and all this stuff. Like, why do they need all that? Like, what was the purpose of all of that? And again, it sounds like a nice thing. Like, I sound like a crazy woman. Why are you complaining about your kid getting it's like a math book, but which is good, and like a whole bag of stuff. But at the end of the day, does every kid need to be sent home with that? Like, I'd rather that money go to supplies to the classroom, because you're sending him home with a math book in the summer. That book's never getting used. Every parent like me, I actually, I didn't throw it out because it was a brand new math book. I posted on the Facebook Moms, and a public school teacher came to my house and picked it up. But it's a small example, but there's a lot of this excess spending that happens. And my mind went where it's like, why is she getting this? Is there some sort of mandate that they have to get this? Did somebody decide the kid should have this? Or, where my mind goes on the Board of Ed, does someone sit on the Board of Ed, does his sister or brother run the book publishing company? And let's get all the kids' books. Like, that could be happening too. And like, that's like, there's a lot of excess spending that's just unnecessary.
It's localized politics is what that is.
Yeah.
It really is. And that kind of brings us back to the original point of the people who don't volunteer, because it's sort of like, wait a second. So you've got like this handful of people who are sort of running the show. Your voice is not being heard and or dealt with in any capacity. And then you want me to come there in my free time. Who's working for who? It's like, you're not paying me. I'm paying you through my tax dollars, right? So why am I constantly being like pulled in to do these things? And then when I show up at a school board meeting, the effort of whatever is, being asked or talked about is not being followed up on in any way. And then, you get a little like burnt out. You're just like, all right, well, no matter how much I come to that school and do something, or no matter how much, I speak up or do anything, there are no changes. So you're just sort of like, you need a volunteer? All right, well, you go.
While there is frustration, at the end of the day, like I will still do the volunteering. My husband does it as much as we can. For me, it's like, it goes back to my kid. I think my mom, when I was a kid, was at my school, she volunteered. And I like that. That's like a nice, good childhood memory. And I think it was important that like my mom seemed to be interested in my education. So I partially am there. I think it's good for my kid to see me there. The other piece of it is, I think these teachers are like, they're not the ones, like, again, if the Board of Ed, if the superintendent of my school is like, come volunteer, I'd rather dig a ditch somewhere in the desert than do that.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good that you would rather dig a ditch somewhere, because, they're deporting everybody that does that. So they're going to need you.
That's true. They actually are going to need, that's a good point. They're going to need me. They're going to need you. They're going to need a lot of us. Yeah.
You're going to need the money, because you're going to have to end up paying for private school at this stage in the way the public school system is going.
I mean, believe me. Yeah.
And speaking of problems for all of us, I want to kind of segue into technology and screens. I mean, there have been numerous studies to show that screen time affects development. It affects development of just regular social skills, right? It's addictive. Like if you try to pull an iPad away from an elementary school kid, I know my daughter has had a complete fit over it, because it's like, it's an addiction, it's a drug, and it's not going to get any better as time goes on, right? And back to what I said, they put all these screens in the school, and it's almost like we're trying to get our kids off of screens, and you're just putting up screens in the school and promoting virtual reality that some of us parents are trying to rail against. What kind of message does that send to our kids? Why aren't we regulating what goes on in the school when it comes to that? Who approved this type of culture in the schools, right? So it works against us.
And I agree with you. I mean, the studies have been done. Screens and developing adolescent minds don't mesh. You're giving your kid a phone or a screen at a young age, like too much of it, like just may as well give them a cocktail. And I agree with you. There shouldn't be screens in a middle elementary school. You don't need that. There's a core things a kid needs to learn before they start getting into like coding and technology and all of that stuff. My daughter's school, the kids do have laptops in the school that they use for certain things that are learning based, that are on a laptop during the day, that my daughter has like fun with. So I do not have a problem with that. And at the end of the day, look, like, does my kid have a screen at home? She does. My kid watches TV. My kid has an iPad. We have strict screen limits, and when it's done, it's done. We let our daughter play Roblox, but all the parameters are on in terms of nobody can message her, nobody can friend her unless we approve it, and she can't get on the internet on this iPad. There's no internet. She can't access any of those things. So you have to put the strict parental controls on, because otherwise, yeah, it's really dangerous.
I feel like they should prohibit all kids from having iPhones or smartphones, any kind of smartphone that has access to the internet and has access to social media. I want to start a crusade of flip phones. I think that should be put into law. You can only have a flip phone until you're 18. After that, then it's on you.
It's funny. It's another debate that sort of comes up where, like, schools are starting to ban kids having cell phones in school, and the parents are getting outraged because of they want, need to be able to contact their kid in case, God forbid, something happens, which sadly is a reality in this separate topic, but sadly is a reality in this country that I, as a parent that sends their kid to a school every day, that I think about. But having said that, like, if you need to communicate with your kid, fair enough, a flip phone can do that. My mom's a high school public school teacher. She's been in that role for 25 years. She said it is between classes now, it's almost quiet in the halls. They're on their phones, not interacting or engaging with each other. And I don't want my kid growing up like that. Like, school should be fun. School should be social. Right. She shouldn't be on a phone.
The phone should simply be a communication device.
Absolutely.
And a flip phone is enough. My older daughter has an Apple Watch, but all you can really do is call and text on it. I mean, you can have some games and stuff, but you can't really do much on an Apple Watch. And my little one has a gizmo. Like, you can voice text and you can make phone calls. That's all the phone should be able to do. It's just about being able to connect, and it shouldn't be all this other stuff. It's a distraction. It's a gateway for bullying, mental health, depression, the whole nine. I mean, there are countless studies about this, and it's just not good. All right, let's shift gears for a second. We're getting almost too serious, Kate. This is not really our wheelhouse, right? Like, we're supposed to be the funnier side of life and the less political side. So speaking of comedy, what's on the docket here? What are you up to these days?
So I'm still doing stand up. I've also been getting into acting, which has been great, and was fortunate to sign with a commercial and legit agent. So I've been doing auditions and things like that. I haven't booked anything yet, but I am close and on the hunt. And what got me that agent was just doing a couple auditions that were just improv that this agent thought was just hilarious. She was right. That's been a lot of fun. I do really love doing the stand-up because like I said, I take, and Marlena, your comedy is the same. It's like you take these things that happen in your life and you can turn them into comedy. And that's how I do my comedy, because like what's funny is real.
I feel like the one common denominator is that everybody likes to laugh. Yeah. You would think. If I try to make fun of something that's completely superficial, right, and it doesn't have any depth, just to insert some comedy into something political or newsworthy, the mob comes after me. If I don't say what they want to hear on the Political Voices Network, and I mostly don't say what they want to hear, but most of the stuff I say isn't like some deep analysis. I'm not a political analyst. I'm a commentator. I'm someone that's the reactivist. I'm reacting, trying to insert some humor. Like if I'm making fun of the left or someone on the left, forget it. Like they go deaf. It's like people are losing their minds and they're sort of losing their sense of humor, right? You're sort of relegated to just talking about your own personal experiences, because then how are they even going to attack you on what you're saying about your own personal experiences?
Yeah.
I mean,
no, it's
although I'm sure they'll find a way, but.
Look, honestly, Marlena, I think sometimes it's hard in general day to day because people have gotten too sensitive. We've over-indexed. We've created this generation, this population that no one can manage through being offended. You're offended, there has to be some kind of outcome, punishment, resolution thing where it's like, no, there doesn't.
Nobody can agree with anything anymore. Politics are just out of control, right? Both sides can't even listen to each other, but they all want to be heard, right? The pendulum has definitely swung too far in the I'm offended realm, and it is the far, far left that does that.
I'm tired of both sides. Nasty on this side, nasty on that side. And like, that's why we're all exhausted, Marlena. It's like, nobody likes that. It's like being in a bad relationship. Like, nobody wants to be surrounded by nastiness. Not in your home, not in your place of work, and certainly not in your day-to-day, like with how your government is being run. And it's both sides doing it. And like, that's the exhausting part. Nobody has the ability to cope with the fact that someone might disagree and say something. And that's why it's broken, because nobody has the ability to cope, even at the highest levels. And if you can't cope and communicate, it's just this. And that's where we are.
That's exactly where we are. And nobody can laugh, and no one can laugh anymore. I mean, I talk about Bill Maher a lot because I find him to be one of the most sane people on this planet. I just do. I mean, just because he doesn't agree with the left all the time, immediately he left the party, he's this, he's that. Like, everyone just pounces on him and they're not actually listening to his reasoning. And if you actually just stop thinking about what you want to say, then, and you actually listen to what somebody's saying to you, maybe, just maybe, you could grow a little bit and maybe see someone else's perspective. It doesn't mean they're going to change your mind, but just the idea that I don't believe that, I don't think that way, therefore you are the enemy, you're not funny, and you're canceled in my mind. You don't really talk much about politics, but do you find it harder to get a laugh, or do you feel like you're just sort of in a space where people are just ready to laugh?
I don't really touch on politics in my comedy because I'm just,
but it doesn't have to be politics. You can be talking about the barista you get coffee from all the time that annoys you, and you can make a joke about it, and then you could have a barista in the audience. It has nothing to do with politics.
Yeah.
And
I have a couple of times had jokes fall flat where I make fun of like weddings and wedding registries, that it's gone like way too far over the top. You know, when I got married, I registered for things that I really needed, like pots and pans. And now you go onto wedding registries and I go through them and I read and I'm like, are you getting married or opening a Michelin star restaurant? Like, what is going on? What is going on right now? Like, pasta maker. That's a big one I see on wedding registries. And it's like, look, if you currently, before getting married, make pasta regularly, great, register for your pasta maker. But you don't. You're not going to get married and just start cranking out fresh fettuccine. Like, oh, we're going to make fresh pasta. No, you're not. And so I make a joke about that. I make a joke about destination weddings. And how I would rather go to jury duty than a destination wedding. That's where I run into a wall where it's like, oh, okay, I guess a few engaged gals floating around in the audience don't want to hear the truth.
I am anti all of that stuff. I mean, to me, you know, you can make all kinds of foods without all of these devices. And I am such a minimalist. I don't want a lot of stuff, right? Yeah. But when I got married, things ended up on my registry that I was like, I know we're never going to use this, but it wasn't me doing it. It wasn't me doing it. So we had a waffle maker. Okay. Like, how many times are we going to be making Belgian waffles? Okay. But that ended up there. A panini press. How many fucking paninis are we going to eat? A wok. Okay. Now I'm Asian. Oh, you ready? A press for sliders. Like, it was some sort of like slider press. Like, I'm like, so you couldn't make sliders with just a spatula or whatever, like a smaller piece of meat. You need an actual slider press. My parents were housing a lot of these extra items, right? Because
I bet too.
How the city is or whatever. And so my mother's like, well, now that you have a house, I can bring you the fine china. And I'm like, I don't want this. She's like, take it. You know, it's been sitting here. I'm like, exactly. It's been sitting there for years unused. And somehow I've been able to feed myself. So you can pull comedy out of tragedy. You can pull comedy out of the everyday life. And you can pull comedy out of current events and politics. But when you cross over that threshold, it's like all bets are off. It's like people just can't see past their own opinions anymore. And it's a struggle. But I think you and I could start a movement, decrease technology and increase comedy. And maybe, just maybe, we might find our way back to center. What do you think?
I agree with all that. I'm going to add in the word acceptance. I think that's part of what it is. Like, people like that, these are the reactions you're seeing. Like, something, it's unacceptable to feel uncomfortable or offended or that someone disagrees with me. And that's the hysteria you're seeing. So at a baseline level, it's getting like a certain level of acceptance and finding a way to manage through that. And if you can get to that, then you can start to laugh and see the humor and see the other side and have a little fun with it.
That is the baseline for all of this. Don't block somebody out just because they don't fully align with everything you believe or think or the way you live, right? I don't know. I think it's a simple concept. I think we can get there with flip phones.
Yeah, that's the way back. Flip phones. That's absolutely the way back.
All right, Kate, this has been fun.
Yeah.
If you want to check out any of Katie's comedy, it's right there on the bottom of the screen. I look forward to your next comedy shtick, and I look forward to our next project together, whatever that may be.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marlene. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Kate. Talk to you soon.